Good evening. Welcome to Employment Law Today. I'm your host, Eric Sauver. I'm an employment law and business law attorney, and I host this show every Tuesday evening at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where my guests and I discuss compelling issues that business owners face in these challenging times, mainly issues involving employment, issues involving business, and we speak to audiences of all industries and businesses of all stripes and sizes. And tonight we have a special guest. My guest is Miss Jessica Robinson. Jessica is the CEO of PurePoint International. Jessica, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here. Great to be here with you.
Great to have you here as well. I want to just talk about our topic a little bit, and then I'll mention more about you in terms of your properly fitting introduction. Our topic tonight, folks, is empowering businesses through cybersecurity. And Jessica and I spoke about this topic a little bit a short while ago. And it seems that, in a world that we live in now where so many businesses have their employees working remotely and online, companies have to be aware of all the different cybersecurity issues and the threats that can destroy their data, can disrupt business, can drain financial resources, and basically can otherwise disempower a company from achieving their main mission. And so in this regard, many socially conscious companies as well, including nonprofits and minority-owned businesses and women-owned businesses, might find themselves targeted specifically for a cyber attack. So the question becomes, how can businesses stay mindful and cyber safe so as to maintain their power to thrive? And speaking about this topic tonight in this episode, I'll be speaking with Jessica Robinson, as I mentioned, founder CEO of PurePoint International. We'll talk about how to identify and protect against these unique cybersecurity risks that women-owned and minority-owned businesses are up against during COVID-19 especially, and we'll offer some solutions to the general cybersecurity issues and challenges that business owners face. Now, Jessica has quite an impressive background. In addition to founding PurePoint International, which I should mention helps CEOs and helps C-level leaders to bridge the gap among data security, cyber risk, and privacy. And PurePoint International provides cybersecurity consulting and training for financial services, for insurance, and other middle market global companies from startup to 350 million in revenue. Jessica's vision is to create a different kind of security company and has earned the company an award for international affairs and women's security from JC's Philippines New York chapter and from the Philanthropy Company of the Year Award for the 2021 Ally of the Year Awards ceremony. Jessica Robinson is also on the board of the authentication technology company NetLock and the $1 Million Women Fund, and she is the board chair of World Pulse. So with that, again, Jessica, it's really great to have you on the show tonight.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here. I'm looking forward to this conversation and talking about cybersecurity with you and how businesses could think about how to protect themselves right now as we live in this world where technology is moving so quickly, and more businesses, no matter what size you are, really have to focus on thinking about how we do protect our businesses.
I think that's really a solid point to begin with, Jessica. And, in delving into that point, I wanted to ask you a little bit more first about you. It was a nice, brief, succinct intro, but if you could tell our audience tonight, the listeners, a little bit more about yourself in terms of how did you get into cybersecurity and what experiences inspired you to form your company, PurePoint International?
Yeah. Well, I was one of those kids growing up where I was part of the safety patrol when I was in the 5th grade. I read all the Nancy Drew books in my school library my 8th grade year. And being a product of the 80s, I saw Matthew Broderick in War Games and was like, that is what I want to do. I want to be a hacker. So it was just this culmination of experiences. And but even before the 5th grade, I was very deeply rooted in this thought and this area of protection. And I just knew that I came into this world and that this was the work I was meant to do in the world. I didn't know how I was going to do it or what I was going to do, but I knew it was meant for me, to the point where like I truly believe like in previous lives, security or some form of security, however it was at that time, was work that I did. And I got into cybersecurity specifically. Kind of fast forward, I did start off as a computer science and launch security major in college, but it was really when I had spent nearly 10 years working in the private sector already, that I was really thinking about what that next step would be for me, and really thinking about my career up to that point and what I was feeling called to do, which was really think about, what does it mean to bring forward a new view of security? One that was really holistic, one that was focused on, yes, physical security and cyber and like security that involved technology, but what about one that centered women and thinking about security more holistically? One that brought an international, which is what I was also really passionate about and focused on in school. And so, in part, this was really calling in all of my skill sets and issues and passions around security, but it was also forward thinking to the future, going, what does the world need in the future? And so bringing in these other aspects of security, or thinking about the, yes, physical and digital security is important, but so is emotional, psychological, and spiritual security. And how do we really think about a feminine approach to security versus a masculine or a militaristic approach, which is definitely needed at times. But as someone who was a practicing Buddhist, very active, particularly at that time, one of the things I knew is that there needed to be a middle way. So
it's interesting. I love asking my guests like this first question about, tell us more about yourself and what motivated you to found your business. Because you learned so many good things. First off, the practicing Buddhist one right here as well. So that's really fascinating to hear. I don't think we actually discussed that in previous conversations, so it's interesting to note that. A couple of things you mentioned there. First, I think a lot of us like go into we get an idea, a taste for a certain field, and like when we're children and we know it's right for us, even when we don't fully understand what the field entails. So with you, perhaps maybe there's war games. With me, perhaps like as a kid watching like certain legal shows on TV, and then as a young, I guess, teenager watching Law and Order. I'm not sorry, LA Law rather. I think before Law and Order, LA Law came out on NBC. But then to hear you like talk about how you pursued your general that purpose and that passion like for security, for protection, and to hear that you're also bringing like an emotional and psychological safety philosophy towards the security. It's just interesting to hear that people are called to all kinds of fields. You think about people being called to like medicine, or ministry, but it can span the gamut. So I'm glad you shared that with us tonight.
yeah, well, it's interesting to talk about ministry. I mean, ministry can ways, right? In many different
Yeah.
fields and many different vocations. And so I think the most important piece is how are individuals be able to connect that passion and purpose to be able to do that work that they're called to do in the world. And so in my work, I feel called to do this work because there are people that I work with every day that are doing work through their own passion and purpose, whether they're politicians, they're elected officials, or in the process of running for office, they're head of an profit, or they're doing something else that puts their own life in danger, or makes them a target of threat. And so for me, my work is meant to support them so that they can live their own passion and purpose.
I definitely want to talk about that sort of subtopic issue, or I should say that narrowed issue with you, to hear your thoughts about the vulnerability to specific threats that minority-owned businesses and socially conscious companies feel, or experience rather, and feel. Can you tell us, Jessica, just for some further context background, what are some of the most common, cybersecurity issues that businesses have been facing since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic?
Yeah, I would say probably the biggest one, really just thinking about how do we work from home in this environment, right? How do we change our processes in a way where they work for us and that they really support our business in being safe? And so, and thinking about how people can work from home, and whether they're on their their business laptops or their personal laptops? How do they work on and connect to an at-home network, possibly if they don't have a business network? How do they think about using a personal VPN if they're not using a company VPN? And how do they also do things like keep their team aware and up to date, and do training around cybersecurity? These are all key things that companies have been struggling with. And even for large companies where they have their own network that their employees are logging into, or they have VPNs that they're providing to their employees, at the end of the day, they're still taking confidential data and they're at their home with this confidential data. And if they're an employee that wants to print off something, that means they're printing it off on their home printer. So the question is, how is that information going to be destroyed in a way that's in line with company policy? Or does their significant other or their spouse who works at home with them, does that person work for a competitor? Or does that person able to overhear conversations where could somehow compromise the information or the data that they're discussing? So all of these are very, very real concerns that companies have been dealing with. They've been big challenges for companies to try to figure this out. And I think one area of this that's really just kind of an overarching theme that again affects businesses of all sizes, but is vendor risk. And so we all have companies that we work with that we're either a vendor to them or a partner, or they're a vendor to us. And so particularly when large companies are trying to think about how do we keep our supply chain secure, and their vendor who is providing them with maybe some really significant critical service to them is working from their own home, that can be security risks, right? For all the things that we just discussed. And so it's really been a challenging time for organizations, and this has had a strong ripple effect on smaller organizations who have had to really think about improve their security posture to some of their ideal clients.
Yeah, you made you made several good points there, but what jumped out at me is interesting, Jessica, is could we talk about cybersecurity and everyone says, oh yes, it's very important, but having those specific details to make us really think, I think is key. You mentioned people working from home, and my mind went to, I guess we're going to discuss, like the non-secure, I'll say, not insecure, non-secure laptop or computer, and sort of like the online presence at someone's home. But you also, and you talked about, say data being protected, not just like on the hard drive or on someone's computer, but what happens when they print it and it's laying around someone's home. Maybe they have, like teenage children who have friends coming over. What happens if a spouse is working with a competitor? So the idea that protection of data, it's not just like cybersecurity can also mean what's on the computer, what's printed off the computer, what's spoken about, on a Zoom conference call, where you can be heard throughout a home, or maybe somebody goes to like a small cafe and, has their computer volume up, which I always find a little bit annoying, but some people do it, and you never know who's. So I think that's an interesting point. And just this idea that besides structured information, people have vendor risk, right? I think a lot of companies, like you said, I'd like to say, they're focused on like, okay, now we have to get our remote workers secure and make sure they have a secure computer, a secure server, encryption. But what happens like if that person then has a bookkeeper, or the company has a bookkeeper who is working from an unsecure network and entering in their data? So it's interesting. It reminds me of non-disclosure agreements where you have a vendor party has to be bound to confidentiality because they're privy to confidential matters too. And so I guess that must be a big topic. Have you seen the vendor risk being a growing topic these days with companies?
Absolutely. It's one of the more regulated areas within cybersecurity. So we've seen an increase in regulation across the board, nationally and internationally. And this is one of those key areas because this is where we've seen a lot of the different cyber incidents take place. And so as a result of this, I've seen 6-person companies whose ideal client is working with Verizon to start to have to take on these strong, intense vendor risk questionnaires to be able to work with them. So it's been very impactful.
It sounds like a good topic to delve a bit more into. And believe it or not, Jessica, we're actually very closely to our first commercial break. Might make sense to take it now rather than start a new question. So I'll just, for those that joined us late, I'm Eric Sauver, host of Employment Law Today, and if you're just joining us, our guest tonight is Jessica Robinson, the CEO and founder of PurePoint International. We're talking about cybersecurity, what you need to know as a business owner. When we come back after the break, we'll talk about trends we see in cyber threats and breaches and how to protect sensitive and vulnerable businesses. So stick around to Talk Radio NYC. We'll be right back.
Are you a business owner? Do you want to be a business owner? Do you work with business owners? Hi, I'm Stephen Fry, your small and medium-sized business or SMB guy, and I'm the host of the new show, Always Friday. While I love to have fun on my show, we take those Friday feelings of freedom and clarity to discuss popular topics on the minds of SMBs today. Please join me and my various special guests on Friday at 11 a.m. on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant. And on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, Thursdays, 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
Are you on edge? Hey, we live in challenging, edgy times, so let's lean in. I'm Sandra Bargman, the host of The Edge of Every Day, which airs each Monday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on talkradio.nyc. Tune in live with me and my friends and colleagues as we share stories and perspectives about pushing boundaries and exploring our rough edges. That's The Edge of Every Day on Mondays at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC. Uplift, educate, empower.
Welcome back to Employment Law Today. I'm your host, Eric Sauver, here tonight with my guest, Jessica Robinson, cybersecurity, can I say expert?
Yeah.
Guru, expert.
Expert that is always learning, right? Things in cybersecurity always moving so quickly, so we're always learning.
Sure. I note that too because certain fields have certain rules about who can and can't call themselves an expert, so I wanted to be mindful of that. But certainly an expert, certainly very, very knowledgeable. And we're talking about trends in cybersecurity and particularly how that might impact minority-owned businesses and businesses owned by people of color. So I guess my next question, Jessica, is can we talk about what are some of the trends of cyber threats or breaches or issues that relate more so to minority-owned businesses?
Yeah, what I would say is when it comes to minority-owned and women-owned businesses, what we're specifically seeing there, or what I see there, is just this expanded focus on one learning more. There has been a need as different as these businesses continue to grow and expand to just really make sure that they're focusing in and including cybersecurity as part of their business strategy. As a result of this, for example, I've recently been a part of a project with Verizon where they created this startup training for women and minority-owned businesses to be able to go through this training and to be able to have a clear idea of how they can really start to incorporate specific areas into their business. So if they're thinking about building a website, what they should be thinking about for security, like an SSL certificate, or if they're concerned about thinking about creating a strategy in their business or helping to ensure that their team feels comfortable around cybersecurity, what they should be thinking about in terms of a policy. A lot of times in the minority and women-owned businesses may not be sure, depending on the type of business that they have, what they can really start to incorporate. So it's really ensuring that there's more accessibility around learning and training in this area. Because at the end of the day, Gone are the days where business owners don't have to know about cybersecurity. It's something that we all have to be aware of. So that's what I'll just say first thing and overall. Personally, I work with vulnerable communities that happen to be a lot of people that are women and people of color. And a lot of times it's people that are in specific roles. So they can be in a position where they're creating a documentary film. They're a movement leader. So they're leading a movement in the country or another country, and they're focused on a specific issue, whether it's human rights or another type of focus. They're an elected official, or they're interested in running for office. The statistics show that people who are underrepresented, the BIPOC community, Black, Indigenous, people of color, or LGBTQI plus community have high rates of threats. They have higher rates of incidents of cybersecurity, but also physical security concerns. This can mean also physical security concerns in their home. It can mean against their family. It can mean threats online via social media. And so the work that we do, and I mentioned earlier, is that part of the work with PurePoint International is that we were built for these vulnerable communities. We were created to really serve this community. And a lot of times these are individuals and organizations where they've already gone to law enforcement. Law enforcement has not been able to help. They've already gone to another security company. Security company has not been able to help. So somehow they have found their way to us. And so we are here to support their needs so that they could live their own passion and purpose, even though that requires a bit of increased risk on their own life or their family's life. And so do a lot of really specific and catered support to them to ensure that they are getting exactly what they need in this holistic way. Because at the end of the day, if you have an increased risk just through the type of work that you do, you can imagine the type of impact that can have on your physical health and also your mental health. So.
Yeah, absolutely, sure. It can really damage all of those. I think really the distraction, the drain on one's mental, faculties, and the stress of being cyber stalked or having social media hacked. It's interesting to see. I mean, it's quite the I guess phenomenon to see that BIPOC often owned businesses and LGBTQIA businesses can face those extra threats. So that's really
again, it's not always businesses. It's not always businesses, but it's depending on the type of work that they're doing. So I definitely don't want to say all businesses are facing this, but depending on the type of work that they're doing, that would within their work and within their field, that would definitely increase risk.
That's an interesting point, right there. Yes, because I mean, say something that's quote unquote more neutral, like say owning a Mario, owning a candy store, certainly a noble business in itself, but might not meet the same level of say public attention, and perhaps be in the crosshairs of very polarized factions of society. Let's say as somebody who's in a political movement, like you mentioned, or say social cause or elected official. So definitely want to mention that part also. It seems that, and I imagine the two might overlap a lot, right? Because often, I mean, you'll certainly find people who are not in those communities who are not perhaps BIPOC or LGBTQ who are involved in certain causes, but for sure I see an overlap of people who in those communities have those causes. It's interesting. And I wonder, how do we, how do you say break down some examples of security actions? So for example, let's say, that take that BIPOC perhaps, owned, or let's say firm that is involved in legislative lobbying or activism, or runs a movement, is an organizer. How do you break down the website, let's say, and the server being safe? Is it piecemeal, or is it all done at one time, or?
Well, it really depends. Everything is situational, and when it comes to this type of work, and also it can be very holistic. It really just depends on how we're engaging with them, depending on the concern. But let's just even take that business owner that has a candy store, though, and we can look at what we would want to do for the website security concern. We want to make sure that if you're a business, you have a website and you do have security for that site, and so that is called an SSL certificate. And that's something that you can get from whoever perhaps you purchased the domain from that website from. And this is also just important to keep in mind because at the end of the day, Google rankings are important, and those that don't have an SSL certificate will get lower ranked on Google. That's one of their ways of trying to really encourage business owners to ensure that they're focusing on security within their own business. And just having a website overall, really ensuring that you're updating it on a regular basis. So, for example, if you have a website, a WordPress website, ensuring that plugins are updated on a regular basis, and that you have a website person that can help you with different things. And then sometimes there may be options for extra security for a website, just like there are options for extra security with your email. And depending on what's going on and depending on your risk level, I do suggest that, but it may not always be needed. It may may want to wait until the business gets a little larger. But either way, always being aware of these different options is always important to do. But the biggest thing is always just really ensuring that everything is up to date. Also be the same thing with any apps that we have on our laptops and our phones. Updating those apps on a continual basis are always important from a security perspective.
So it's updating and protecting apps on the phone, like it's a website, it's email, it's basically, I guess I imagine it could be all of those things and could be done at once or piecemeal, perhaps depending upon someone's resources financially, perhaps depending upon how their company or business or firm or entity runs. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, they can be done piecemeal. And depending on how you're looking at it, a lot of times it can be done piecemeal if you have a specific concern. But if you're someone who's thinking and just wanting to be proactive about something, having working with can help you really take an overview of your business to really help you look at, well, where are the biggest risks? If you were to actually only say, if you were going to pick two areas, I tell people be bulletproof in two areas. By bulletproof, I mean that just be great in those areas. There's so much to do and it can be so overwhelming to think about what to do from a security standpoint. But talking with some to really find out, well, what are the most important areas for your business, whether you have a restaurant or you have a candy store or you have a consulting business or you have a bakery, whatever that happens to be, if you just focus on whatever those two main areas are, let's say there's 10, but if you focus on the first two, you can always focus on 3 and 4 at a later time. But just be great at those two things. And so that if something happens within the business, at least you can say that you've focused and you have great routines around those two things. And even doing that, you'll be far ahead of so many other businesses. So it's a great place to start.
It's interesting to say that too. I mean, it's I think about employment law often, right, where in so many areas of compliance and to get into up to date with the law and speed with it, it's lockstep with the law, and a lot of business owners get overwhelmed, employers get overwhelmed by that, and it's like if you can sort of focus on like the main key areas right now, and also where you might see a fire that potentially could start, a metaphorical fire, of course, not an actual fire, but that would be more of a perhaps safety, property damage type legal area, but, or insurance. But it's interesting, yeah. I mean, it's interesting you say that because I think about some of the obstacles that business owners sort of either they see it or they perceive it to be real, and I can see how getting overwhelmed, having feeling like it's cost prohibitive, could, in fact, I'm wondering if that might be a good topic to discuss after the commercial break, to talk about maybe like say what are some of the obstacles that business owners perceive, whether they're real or not. Oh, this is too expensive, or this is going to take too long, and what are some of the responses? So maybe we can talk about it after the break. Does that sound like a plan?
Fantastic. Would love to dive into that.
Excellent. I can see your excitement already, Jessica. I see your passion. I love it.
Yes.
No, really, I really do. So, and hopefully our audience is getting some valuable information tonight. So, folks, you're listening to and watching Employment Law Today. I'm your host, Eric Sauer, and here tonight with Jessica Robinson, CEO, founder of PurePoint International. So, on Talk Radio NYC. So, stick around. We'll be right back.
Howdy. Hey, Joseph Franklin McElroy, host of the new podcast, Gateway to the Smokies. It airs on talkradio.nyc every Tuesday night from 6 p.m. to 7. Every episode is dedicated to memorable experiences in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park and surrounding areas. This show features experts and locals who expound upon the richness of culture, history, and adventure that awaits you in the Smokies. Tune in every Tuesday from 6 p.m. to 7 on talkradio.nyc.
Are you passionate about the conversation around racism? Hi, I'm Reverend Dr. TLC, host of the Dismantle Racism Show, which airs every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern on talkradio.nyc. Join me and my amazing guests as we discuss ways to uncover, dismantle, and eradicate racism. That's Thursdays at 11 o'clock a.m. on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a small business trying to navigate the COVID-19 related employment laws? Hello, I'm Eric Sauver, employment law business law attorney and host of the new radio show, Employment Law Today. On my show, we'll have guests to discuss the common employment law challenges business owners are facing during these trying times. Tune in on Tuesday evenings from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern Time on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc, now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Welcome back to Employment Law Today. I'm your host, Eric Sauer, employment law business law attorney, and here tonight with my guest, Jessica Robinson, CEO and founder of PurePoint International. Jessica handles all things cybersecurity, security in general, breaches, and helping businesses and helping also organizers and firms and just entities to protect themselves, protect their data. And so, Jessica, again, it's really great to have you on the show tonight.
Yeah, wonderful to be here. Thank you for having me. I've been so enjoying this conversation with you.
Same here for sure. It's like interesting because I think, there are a lot of parallels. I talk about on this show, I talk about issues of employment law and also employee relations, but also business issues that employers face. Because if you're having trouble with cybersecurity or video or marketing or, your financial well-being, it can really, impact your employee relations and could really, be a challenge for the business as a whole. So I think it's all kind of tied in, very much so. And
I mean, and team and staff are just such a huge piece of cybersecurity as well. I mean, everyone plays a role in it, and I think that I think that there are so many different issues that can relate back to the human piece and how we can protect our data and how we can protect our organization. So I'm glad that you brought that up because I feel like we haven't talked as much about that, but I think it's so incredibly important, and it does lead back to the question around trends that you asked, just in general of the role employees can play in an organization. And a lot of times, what we do consistently see is that employees a source of a breach, and still the number is above 90% as the humans within an organization are the cause for a breach. So.
Did you say the number is about 90% of the breaches are? Did I hear that correctly? Is that
That's still a general number. It is still very much a general number. Now, the different types of breaches and how they happen, goes down to about 48% when we start to break all that down. But at the end of the day, if someone's clicking on a link and that is resulting in a ransomware attack, or if it's resulting in any type of malware being downloaded, or if someone didn't create a strong enough password, and that password is breached, and that's one of the concerns that happens as well within an organization. And then, humans play such a huge role in this.
I think that's an important point to make, Jessica, because I think a lot of people don't realize that their employees might inadvertently or erroneously and perhaps sometimes maliciously or with intent compromise the company, the businesses, or the security, cybersecurity. I think, like we think about cybersecurity threats, it's the Russian bots, or it's some external, evil hacker somewhere, some entity, and yet that's why that number really surprised me. I imagine it probably surprised like some people in the audience listening at home tonight or watching at home tonight to think, wow, my employees, they could be a source of a major data breach just by clicking the wrong link. It's, I think, something worth really noting there. Yeah.
Absolutely. And, when we think about what we were talking about earlier before the break about the costs that go into cybersecurity for an organization and what the organizations can be thinking about from a cost perspective as they're putting a budget together, is one of those things can be training. How are we focusing on training within the organization and really supporting our employees in being aware? And there are some really wonderful solutions out there that don't cost a lot of money, but you can have a security partner come in and do something that is very tailored to your organization to ensure you're getting exactly what you need. But either one of those options can really help support you and have an exponential impact with your team actually gaining clear knowledge and knowing the role that they play in cybersecurity. So it's always a wonderful thing to do. But when we also talk about putting a budget together and thinking about the cost or the financial impact of cybersecurity, in a kind of a proactive way, there are some very, very basic things that every organization can do from a very simplistic perspective. And one of them is having a password manager. And so depending on the size of your organization, having a password manager, if you have 3 people, if you have 100 people, you can get one that it's where there's a cost per user, and typically that cost per user decreases per user with the larger the number of individuals. But it's a great way to really ensure that your passwords are being created in a way where they're strong. That you have a tool that helps your employees to remember those passwords so that they don't have to do that. And that tool can authenticate for the organization to whatever tools that they're using. And so I would, now and then I'll give you an example of maybe how much something like that would cost. So if you, let's just here, you have a team of 6 to 10 people.
Right.
Let's just say it's, let's just say $3 per user, anywhere from $3 to $5 per user. Well, if you have 10 people, and let's just say we'll take the highest number there, it's $5 per user. Well, that's going to be $50, right?
Wow.
So that may not be as bad, and so and it could, and again, that could vary in multiple different ways. But at the end of the day, sometimes we think that these things are a lot of money, and they may not be as much as we think. And there may be an initial investment cost to it. So let's say it's $50, and then there's an additional $50. But even still, that's $100. So that's not a bad investment amount. And then there's also a VPN, a virtual private network. So to ensure that we're connecting to our local network or our home network in a secure way. That can be really important if there isn't a organizational network, but for organizations that do have an organizational network, having a virtual private network where your team can log in from home in a secure way to your home, to your business network is important. That can run anywhere from 65 to 85 per person. But again, the more people that are added, then that can decrease that individual amount.
Yeah.
And so there are a number of different tools like that can actually be very useful and may not be as expensive as people think. So
it's really something there, I think, because we're talking about 2 things, right? We're talking about like the cost benefit analysis in terms of how much something costs, and of course the benefit, on the other side of the scale, if you don't spend the money on the cybersecurity, what is some of the potential loss? But I also think what's important is when you look at a cost benefit analysis in any situation, you have to know the actual real cost, not the imagined cost, And so, like, I have to admit, I didn't know that a password manager would be so cheap. I did know the rough prices for the rough cost, let's say, like for the VPN, the virtual private network, as you mentioned, and maybe we can even tell us a little bit more about like how that works in a moment. But I would say that to hear that you can have a password manager set up for $3 to $5 per person, and that could help so that your like say like your partners or your employees are not putting in, like password 1234 or 12345, I think is their password that somebody can guess. I think it's really a good thing to talk about on the show tonight. So I'm glad you kind of brought that up, as I was going to ask you that same question. Like, let's talk about some numbers. Let's talk about the cost, so the audience doesn't think, oh, this is going to be thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars. And you're saying some things might, but basic precautions. Um, can you share with us, like, say, one more example of a basic precaution that business owners might not realize is actually pretty inexpensive and pretty proficient?
Yeah, of course. So we talked earlier about the SSL certificate, the secure socket layer SSL certificate for our websites. Those I believe those were maybe about 100, maybe 129 a year, something like that. And all of this will vary on the provider, right? It will vary on who you're working with, all of that. But generally speaking, these are the what I recall and how and the services that I'm using with the clients I work with. So is whether it's $99 you get it on sale or it's $150 for the year, is that this is still pretty reasonable to be able to secure your website and to feel confident that that your site is secure, that when you have clients that come to your site, they will see the lock icon, they will know that your website is secure, and that if anything were to happen, that you're also the provider that you have will be able to help support you with resolving concerns. I mean, I can tell you for sure that for me, one of the things I do notice is whether a site is secure or not. And sometimes I get a block up or like a pop-up sign that comes up that tells me that it isn't a secure site.
Right.
If it isn't a secure site, then I'm just not going to go. I'm not going to continue to say I'm going to accept the risk and go to the site. I'm just not going to.
Yeah.
And so it's something to keep in mind for people that don't have this and are inviting clients to go to their website, because whether you realize it or not, you can send a very different message than you intend.
I think that's an excellent point too. So you think about the benefit, not just being to your data and your website, let's say, or to your company, but also to your, I guess your brand, right? Like your reputation, and that I think because people do want to see that a site's secure. I know I won't go to a website that says, like warning and a big red exclamation mark and something like that. It's and people don't always realize that even if somebody does decide to go to that site, says I'm sure it's probably safe, it leaves like a bit of a mark, in their subconscious, in their psyche, that associates this business, let's say, or organizer, or movement, or elected official, like with caution and danger. So I think that's a really important point you made there too. It's all part of that cost-benefit analysis, I imagine, right? That look at what your cybersecurity is costing you, look at what it's helping you to achieve, and those are great examples. I mean, the VPN, the password management, right? The website. I feel like you're giving us a lot of good information. So that's really, concrete stuff is always good to hear. I'm curious, is there like a big step? You talked about some of the small steps. Is there like one big step that people really want to say, you know what, we need to invest, we need to get Jessica on the phone or an email, and we need to call PurePoint and say, like, this is a major overhaul, we're ready to do it. Like, what would that look like?
Absolutely. We do have clients that absolutely are interested in that. And that's part of our signature service that we offer. It's called our virtual CISO, Chief Information Security Officer service. And we do have companies that are absolutely interested in really looking at their whole entire business and really thinking about their business strategy and what their cybersecurity strategy can look like with that business strategy.
That's a good topic, I think, perhaps to get into after the break. It actually is, believe it or not, like our last commercial break. We'll come back and we'll be talking for another 15 minutes or so. But so you're watching or listening to Employment Law Today. I'm your host, Eric Sauver, here on Talk Radio NYC with my guest, Jessica Robinson. Stick around. We'll be right back.
Join us every Tuesday at 4 p.m. Eastern for The Mind Behind Leadership, where we focus on what leadership really means to us and to others. We have practical discussions with the CEOs of some of the world's largest companies, owners of small businesses, and experts in psychology and behavior to get that inside track, what to do, what to avoid, and what really happens. Join me, Graham Dobbin, at the new time, 4 p.m. every Tuesday for The Mind Behind Leadership, here live on talkradio.nyc. Hey,
everybody. It's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on talkradio.nyc, I host a program, Philanthropy in Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on talkradio.nyc.
Calling all pet lovers.
Pet Avengers, assemble!
On the Professionals and Animal Lovers show, we believe the bond between animal lovers is incredibly strong. It mirrors that bond between pets and their owners. Through this program, we come together to learn, educate, and advocate.
Join us live every Wednesday at 2 p.m. at talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Welcome back to Employment Law Today. I'm your host, Eric Sauber, employment law business law attorney for small and mid-sized business owners. Here tonight with another professional service provider, Jessica Robinson, not an attorney, but certainly an expert in cybersecurity, protecting companies through her company, PurePoint International. So Jessica, I think we started talking about some of the bigger, perhaps, measures that before the break that a company can take. And I think that might be a nice segue to my last question for you, which is, what are some of the ways that you and your company, PurePoint International, work with businesses to overcome all those different challenges that we were speaking about over the last 45 minutes?
Yeah. So we'll come in and spend time with the business, really learning about the business and finding out where their biggest challenges are and where we can help. And depending on how this happens, a lot of times we come in to an organization after they've had a major incident. So that's kind of the major point of entry. But a lot of times companies are being very proactive, particularly nowadays. That's really been a big point of change over the past 3 years specifically, of companies really being proactive and knowing that there's a concern in their business or that they're not meeting their own expectations for security and wanting to increase their own maturity level. And so we'll spend time with an organization, the leadership team, and also the IT team, or if they have people on a security team there, to really understand how we can best support them, and then help them with a strategy that they can create and a roadmap that can help them really think about how to embed cybersecurity into their business in a very holistic way, but also in a way that really supports them where they are and where they want to be. So it's not something that's going to be completely overwhelming, but it's going to help them to reach their goals. And a lot of times this is important specifically because they're meeting regulatory compliance concerns that they have to meet, particularly if they're in a certain industry. So if they're in financial services or healthcare, they know that they have to do this and want to do it. But we're also seeing consulting companies that aren't necessarily in these maybe high compliance areas, but it's possible that, again, they're serving clients that are in those areas. So though their clients have a high expectation of them to meet some of the same requirements that they have. And these companies want these clients, they want to serve these clients and continue working with them. So they're a lot of them really are stepping up and to really ensure that they're doing everything that they can.
I guess that's sort of like the vendors, right? That we talked about earlier this evening. You have to make sure that your vendors are also practicing safe cybersecurity policies and practices and procedures. I could definitely see that, impacting attorneys, business consultants, fractional CFOs for sure, along with like the companies and business owners themselves. So you sit down. It sounds like I hear you say you're proactive. The companies come to you, some proactive, some perhaps panicked. That's always the two categories I like to joke about in many areas, especially in employment labor law too. Like some clients would come to me, like per your point, very proactively. They want to protect their business from employment labor law issues and violations and get ahead of the curve before something bad happens. Others will come when they serve that lawsuit, when they have, let's say, in the alternative, the Department of Labor audit investigation or finding with stiff penalties and judgments against them. So it's definitely interesting, I think, is to see how companies vary, but good to hear that you can help, business owners out there and firms that maybe they're coming to the table proactively, or maybe they're not, but you can still help them, I imagine, to get things straightened out.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and that's what we're here for. And yeah, at the end of the day, business owners, you're not expected to be the expert in security, but you are expected to know that something needs to happen within your business to actually have a strategy. And so, having the right partner there to really help you along the way is important and it's critical. But we're also just to your point earlier about visiting and going to a website and having this pop-up sign and not and knowing that you just don't want to go to a site that isn't secure. Customers and clients are much more aware now than they were 5 years ago. And one of the things that they're looking for is to know that their data is secure, right? That that they are going to websites that are safe and that they can have conversations that they know will be confidential. And so the currency on trust is just becoming so much higher for clients. There's really this kind of accountability that's there for business owners too, that in some cases, it does not matter what your size you are, that these are certain things just from a social contract perspective that it's important that companies are meeting.
Right. It's the whole sort of point of community, and the idea that these issues of cybersecurity and data breaches and data safety can impact the business at so many different stages, whether you're starting up the business, whether you're going public, or whether, let's say, you have a plan to sell your business one day, right? I imagine that if you're selling a business that has not the most updated standard cybersecurity measures in place, and has had some issues of breaches, could really perhaps devalue the company, whether in actuality or in the mind of the potential buyer. This is, I don't want this.
Absolutely, absolutely. I was working with an insurance company through a merger. And there's no doubt that when a company is thinking about selling their business, that cybersecurity maturity has to be one of those areas. Today's day, if that area of the business isn't proven to be up to date, then it's very easy for a company who's trying to purchase another company to immediately start to lower the price that they're willing to pay for that company, and they would have the right to do so because security does carry such a high financial value to it.
Right. It's like, you have the security is key to the value of the company for so many reasons. And that's, I think, an interesting point to note. Absolutely. Do you work with clients, let's say, are whether your clients and customers, Jessica, are they, well, I guess is it international? Is that where the name comes from? PurePoint International? You have clients in other countries or mostly clients here in the US?
Yeah, no, we work with clients all over. We work with clients that are in other parts of the world, but maybe have a part of their business in the United States. So they're concerned about the U.S. laws here, and so they need to have someone here in the U.S. about that. We work with organizations that are here in the U.S., but maybe thinking about or are international because they're also then thinking about depending on where they're going, what the laws are there, and just need some support and thinking about all the things that they have to do. Just from a data transfer standpoint, if they're taking in personal data from another country, let's say, or from another territory like the European Union, what do they need to be thinking about? And so helping them to prepare and to plan for that.
I think that's a really interesting point you raised, that the international laws and standards in different communities can be different. And so a company might, let's say, for example, be acquiring data or doing business in Europe, and there's the GDPR, right? The data protection rule that applies for how you, protect, store personal data. And then there's, of course, laws that impact in California and the states. So good to remind our audience that this is about protecting your business and also your image and your brand and following the law, what you're sort of compelled to do. So I think it's most definitely, a really crucial topic for these times, and particularly with everyone, as you mentioned, with a lot of people, I should say, not everyone, a lot of people working remotely. And so kind of we're breaking down hey, this is really important, and it's not okay to just give it lip service in terms of if you want to have a safe, secure business.
Yeah, absolutely. You really have to do it because people and individuals and clients, they're interacting with companies that are doing these things. And so when they come to your business and maybe you're not asking them to things, or like in order to share data, there doesn't seem to be a very secure way of doing that. Really wanting to ensure that you're following all practices is really important. So
absolutely, for sure. I think it's such a crucial point to make there. And we're really, I think, hitting on some key topics tonight. And I also, I want to thank you for just breaking this all down into manageable chunks, because people are not always aware of the different rules and how to do things, how to approach a topic that seems so, I guess, mysterious to them. So I hear you sort of just bringing it, back to some basics, some simple steps, some more comprehensive steps. We talked about like the need for data security. I think if there's a house, if you have a house and you have no security, no locks, and by the way, we're at the 2 minutes to end marks. At this point in the show, Jessica, I can turn the floor over to you and say, tell us, how do we reach you? Any upcoming webinars or books? Like, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks. Well, what I would definitely say is connect with me on LinkedIn. I would love to talk with you there, and you can also direct message me there. You could also visit our website at www.the-purepoint, PurePoint.com. And one thing I'll just say in closing is, this is also about love. Love is one of our values in our company, and this is about loving your data enough, loving your systems enough, loving your team enough, loving your clients enough, but also loving yourself enough to not put you in a position that could have easily have been prevented. And so we talked about some things today that you could easily implement in your business. So I would encourage you to do that. But of course, you can always direct message me if you want to have have a longer conversation that can really help you in thinking about security in your business holistically.
Interesting point there about the sort of the act of love for one's business, oneself, and acknowledging the importance of taking care of their own safety and security from outside threats. Really, really powerful. I feel like we could, if we had more time, get into you mentioned sort of the feminine versus masculine approach. Unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, we had a really good hour together and we're coming towards a close. And on that note, I would note that we're about a minute off. I'd say, folks, you're listening to Employment Law Today on Talk Radio NYC. Stay tuned for other great programming on the station. You can reach out to Jessica Robinson for your security needs. And join me here Tuesday nights, 5 p.m. at Talk Radio NYC, or at their Facebook page. You can have a great discussion, great conversation, learn a lot. So thank you all. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving. Jessica, thank you again. Happy Thanksgiving to you and your family.
Thank you. You as well.
Wonderful.